welcome to this week's Trader Talk TV episode. Joining us today is Mike Dewhirst, CTO and co-founder of StrikeAd. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Do you want to quickly describe and just tell the audience who StrikeAd are, in case someone are unaware?
Sure. StrikeAd is a mobile DSP. We're a trading platform that integrates lots of exchange traffic from different sources, and then we resell that and allow our clients to buy that traffic intelligently to retargeting, audience targeting, things like that.
Okay, great. So to provide some context of why Mike is here today, as many are aware around the mobile industry, there's been this problem, a historic problem around targeting and tracking seamlessly across different devices.
Yeah.
So I guess first of all, why has there been that problem? I mean, in that transition from desktop to mobile, why has there been this problem around having a seamless way to track?
Sure. I guess the main reason is that the way people access the internet from a device and the way they access it from a mobile device or a desktop device.
Yep.
When you have a desktop device, traditionally and classically, it's just one application that you use to access it. With one browser, you don't really switch from between 3 different browsers on a desktop device or a laptop. Whereas on a mobile, you'll have a mobile browser, you'll have several apps that you'll be working through. All of that creates issues.
Okay.
It means that you are actually seen as several different users, and for an advertiser, they don't want to view you as 5 different users. It becomes very cost inefficient. So that's really the main issue.
But also this issue of cookies as well, right? So we've been the way we've been targeting and tracking for so long now on desktop is through cookies. And why has there been that problem with mobile? Again,
in online, because you're only really using a browser to access the internet, cookies are always available. You know, you can drop them pretty much anywhere. There's not really been any restrictions, and it's been the mainstay of all tracking and online.
Because it's a consistent browser.
Yeah, same browser. All browsers support cookies. The mechanism's been there, it just works.
Yep.
Yep. You know, there's sort of slight differences between an HTML cookie and a Flash cookie, but it's all the same, really.
Flash cookies are naughty
yeah, words. Exactly. And then in mobile, you have apps that just don't have the concept of cookies. You also now have you know, a rising wave of in-app sort of cut-down browsers that you can drop cookies, but you'll only be able to see them within the app. Or you have to start using things, you know, like fingerprinting or device IDs, and then device IDs get into problems with PII or personally identifiable information. So all these issues in mobile, you know, just tip of the iceberg.
Okay, so I think it would be really useful for us today then for you to talk us through, map out for us how can mobile targeting work. One of the methods that you're working on at StrikeAd. Maybe start around retargeting, because obviously it's the first thing that advertisers look to do in any kind of campaign in desktop display, which is how do I activate my first party audience. And then maybe we'll go on to how can you then start bringing in third party audience data, behavioural targeting and so forth. So
sure.
What pen do you want? Blue?
I'll go with blue, and then we'll go into other colours if we need to. So firstly, I guess if we quickly list out the different methods of tracking.
Yep.
Just as a start, I mean, might be familiar with them already, but just as a reiteration.
Okay.
So the first method, I guess, is still cookies. So there is actually a really big misconception in the industry where most of the people that I speak to that are just getting into it, they say, oh, but cookies don't work on mobile. That's not actually true. They work absolutely fine. The only exception is that if you are putting a pixel, or if you're showing an ad on a site that's not the same as where you're putting the ad from. So let's say you're on Amazon.com, but you're putting a banner ad from StrikeAd, for example. Then StrikeAd will not be able to drop a cookie if you are on an iPhone.
Okay.
So this is the only restriction. If you've already dropped it on that user's browser before, you'll actually be able to read it. So the only restriction really is third party cookies, and it's only on iPhone.
So for any Android device.
Yep, absolutely no problem. And actually, to clarify, it's setting third-party cookies on iPhones. Reading is no problem, and Android and other devices like BlackBerries and Windows Phone 7, again, not really a problem.
Okay.
Second method is device IDs. Device IDs come in many shapes and forms. You know, there's the iPhone UDID, which has been dropped. There's the IDFA, the ID for advertising. There's been sort of in the transition from Apple from the previous UDID. That is actually pretty much the same as the UDID. They've dropped one, they've produced another one, it does pretty much the same thing. There's a couple of other bits around it, like with that ID you also get information about whether the user wanted to be tracked or not.
And I guess they have more control around.
A little bit more, but we've looked sort of pretty much at near enough at the source code, and all in all it's more or less the same.
Okay.
Then there's the the MAC address and things like that. The MAC address is just the address of the network card, the Wi-Fi card,
right.
Within the device. So it's the same on desktop PCs, etc. It's just another ID that is the same and unique for all the different devices out there.
Okay.
I can keep going like this. I'm sure you get the idea. I won't. The only other thing to bear in mind is that because of PII issues and personally identifiable information, and governments trying to protect users from not being clearly identified as as a specific person, there needs to be some sort of a mechanism to make these a little bit safer.
Okay.
And the way to do that is to hash them or to encrypt them.
Yep, yep.
So there's two ways really in the industry to encrypt these and many more different IDs. One is the SHA-1 hash, and then the other one is MD5. I mean, these are just acronyms, doesn't really matter what they mean, just two different ways of encrypting data, but it means that, for example, the IDFA might come through to you in two ways, encrypted through this method or through that method. Why all of this is important, and I'll get to more tracking methods as well, is that when you're sitting in the middle and you're receiving third-party traffic,
yep.
i.e. you're not on the user's device as you're actually showing them the ad, you need to first receive an ad request, decide whether you want to show them an ad, and then respond with an ad.
Yep.
It means that you have to work off data that's being passed to you,
yep.
and make a decision without getting onto the user's device. So you have to go through quite a lot of different sort of hoops and jumps to try and understand whether it's a user you've seen before, for retargeting, for frequency capping, for these sort of things.
Okay.
And then the third method is fingerprinting.
And this is the process of device recognition.
Yeah, fingerprinting is I would actually say that the name itself is a little bit negative. A lot of people think that it's very secretive and very clever about getting information about you that you might not want to share. It's not really. Think of fingerprinting as a way of identifying people by taking a photo and blurring it out. Right. So from you'll be able to see the outline, and you'll be able to see a blurry face. You won't know that it's you or me, but probably if you took two pictures and looked at our photos, you'd see that it's two different people.
Okay.
So it doesn't tell you who the person is, and you wouldn't really be able to work out who they are exactly.
But provides variables about that.
And it really narrows it down to very few choices, so you can be pretty certain that this is a person that you've seen before, and there it is, they are coming through again.
But it's more of a statistical method to infer that it will be the same person. Yeah.
So you're looking at things like the version of your phone, when it was produced, the operating system version,
yep.
and other factors that are sort of as unique as possible to you, maybe by how much the clock on your phone is offset, behind or ahead of time, etc. All those little things that come together, they produce these sort of, again, code. It's very similar to any kind of device ID. Yeah. It's just a string of letters and numbers, and it's a way of identifying somebody and trying to retarget them.
Okay.
So those are really the three main methods: cookies, device IDs, and fingerprinting. Now, shall we talk about what you do with that and how that becomes useful for retargeting? Yeah,
I mean, it'd be useful to draw out the process of how you can use one of these methods and how that actually works from an end-to-end perspective of ad requests coming in, deciding and going out. So, I mean,
I'll probably work this away.
Okay.
So if I talk about how all those different tracking methods actually work all the way through end to end, when you're running an ad, that might help understand the whole thing a little bit better. So obviously talking about a mobile device and either a browser or an app on that device, and it's important to mention that because the two kind of are almost seen as two different users.
Yeah.
So in that scenario you will have either an SSP or an exchange, and these guys will be receiving ad requests from thousands of apps and devices like this. These ad requests will be going through either to a DSP or to an ad network. I mean, the process is pretty much the same. As you're looking at a website and a page starts to load, and then a request will come through to the DSP, and all these device IDs or cookie IDs or data that allows you to generate a fingerprint will come through from that ad request, and
it all comes through at the same time.
Everything in the ad request that you need to make a decision will be in there. There's loads of different fields. The device ID, the device name, the site that the ad might appear on, etc. It's all comes through in one. You will then review that data as a DSP or as an ad network, generate your fingerprint if the data's come through, or there's companies out on the market that are sort of trying to drive an industry standard approach to fingerprinting. They will actually embed little bits of code within the app or run JavaScript within the browser to generate the fingerprint.
Right, okay.
The only problem is, unless these guys actually integrate with the ad exchange prior to that whole thing starting to happen, you can't really, they're not really, there's not really a lot they can do.
Okay.
So if you're talking to an ad exchange that's not working with any of those people, there's not really much fingerprinting you can do. Bit of a problem, but there you are. I like problems. So that data comes through. You then have to basically build up a database of users. If we're obviously talking about audience targeting and retargeting and frequency capping, in order to track users. If you're not doing that, you don't really need a database. You can just treat every ad as a unique ad, and you can build up some stats about a device that works and a site that works.
It's basic optimization.
Exactly. But it's pretty simple optimization. It doesn't need a database or a database on your favorite word, big data. Whereas if you are talking about retargeting and audience targeting, you can't get away from it. You need a database that, by the way, just to clarify the terminology, when I talk about big data, all I mean is internet scale type data, so billions of records. And that data needing to be accessed in real time very, very quickly, so within milliseconds. And what that usually implies is that you can't actually store anything to disk. So normally a database will have hundreds of gigs on disk and you'll be able to read it within a few seconds, no problem. When you're doing this, it all has to be in memory. So you have to have loads of servers that hold the whole thing in memory. It becomes a little bit expensive, a little bit difficult to develop. So anyway, you have this audience database. You are storing the data that comes through here, like either the device ID or the fingerprinting if that's in place, and against that data you're recording sort of statistical information about the user, like how many times they've been to a certain site, or maybe through one of the ad requests before you've recorded what gender they are, etc. And you start to build up an audience profile. You might also start attaching to that audience data things like how many, which app the user has downloaded and installed on their device and so on. All those things start becoming interesting because if you're an advertiser, for example, if you're an advertiser with an app that's got thousands of users out there, you probably will not want, ideally, to run advertising that is going to be shown to those users because they already have the app. So by storing that information in the audience database, when you're making this decision and when you're then responding with an ad back to the ad exchange and that ad going back here, what you're able to do is go into here quickly, and if you see that this specific user here already has the app, you actually make the decision of not showing them the ad and you wait for the next ad request. Equally, if you again are an app developer and you want to flip it on its head and you want to show an ad only to those that already have it, maybe to drive them back into the app. For example, if it's a book reader app, you might want to promote certain books being on offer. And again, you can
comes like a bit like an eCRM strategy around
exactly
only apps to be.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit, funnily enough, easier to do in mobile because of the device ID. So if you're working off device IDs, you don't need to do cookie syncing. We can talk about cookie syncing a little bit later, but it's a method that sometimes takes a little bit of time for everything to to percolate through. To have the same cookies on the device and on the exchange and on the DSP. So when the exchange sends you a cookie ID that I mentioned here, you already have these two mapped to your own cookie IDs.
I mean, so this is starting from an ad request on a browser or an app. Where does it fit in then? If we're talking around how does an advertiser retarget? So we mentioned around the app piece, but if it's like a browser, to a mobile optimized site,
then you're back to cookie IDs. So if you're talking about browsers, The common method still is cookies, and I guess there's now a slight variation. Works both on mobile and on desktop through HTML5 cookies.
Right.
They're not really cookies. It's just a way of storing data from within HTML. So a web page can say, I want to store some data on this device, and that can be quite a lot of data. Do you use Gmail?
Yeah.
So Gmail provides that mechanism so that you don't have to actually be connected online and can still read your emails.
Yeah.
It stores it using HTML5.
Okay.
You can store a little bit of data like a cookie or a user ID. So using that method, you identify the user, and the exchange will have a bunch of user IDs stored either through cookies or HTML5, and they will send these through to the DSP or to the ad exchange when the ad request is coming from a browser. Now the trick is then having a matching list of those IDs that you understand and have data against in your own database, but mapped to the exchange IDs.
Yeah, of course, okay.
So at StrikeAd, for example, in our audience database, we have a really long list of different IDs against every user, where we have our own, but also the NextAge ID and the Rubicon, all the different exchanges that we're connected with, MobClicks, etc. So that whoever sends us an ad request, they'll have their own ID in it, and we can go into our database, look up what data we have attached against the user, and then decide whether to respond with an ad or not.
But if I'm using, I'm on, say, sky.com or their shop, for instance, and I'm browsing around, how is someone initially dropping that initial cookie onto my device?
Yep. So if you're, for example, sky.com, and you want to run an advertising campaign and retarget users then later appearing on other sites, then the only way to do it is by dropping an ad network or a DSP cookie onto the browser site, onto your site, or setting a pixel on that site.
In the same way it works on desktop.
Exactly, yeah. So you drop that pixel, or just whilst we're on it, we're back to apps, then the process is actually more instant, where the app developer just gives you a list of device IDs, and you do it the same way. Or if it's through fingerprinting, then again you need to drop it's not quite a pixel, but let's call it an app pixel. And that app pixel will, through fingerprinting, collect your user IDs over time. When you've collected enough, then as you collect them, you're also mapping them against the different exchange IDs. And once you get a sizable enough audience, you can start your advertising campaign.
Okay, and then so that's fairly clear then around it's constantly retargeting them. But in terms of let's say I want to integrate. I want to leverage a third-party audience segment for in-market car buyers. How does that fit in?
Again, pretty much all within the confines of this mechanism, where the only difference would be that rather than just dropping a pixel onto the site and an advertiser telling you, I want to target those users that have been to this page but haven't been to this one, in this instance, they would also provide you when you drop the pixel, you would be dropping the pixel in a slightly different way, and you would be syncing it with their cookie IDs. So that in your audience database, you will end up with your user IDs and the IDs from, let's say, the advertiser's CRM. Then the advertiser can make, that's their third-party data, and they can make a decision to segment a certain audience out of that CRM and go after it, and they would do this by providing you with a list of IDs, and you're then targeting those. Or a slightly different way would be real-time queries. So they wouldn't give you any data about their users, but they would give you a user ID every time the user attended the site, and there would be a real-time query from this audience database to a third-party audience database. Obviously, once the IDs were synced, and that would allow you to leverage third-party data in your decisioning. And really, the key thing here is the syncing mechanism.
And if is this a server-to-server integration, or?
Yes, it is. Well, it's the calls and the ad decisioning is server-to-server, and then the actual user identification, some of it has to be done on the client side through dropping pixels and syncing user IDs in that pixel drop.
Okay, makes sense. Great. Well, I think that's pretty clear and maybe quite an elegant way of trying to map out this process.
Great, thank you very much.
So thank you for taking the time to do that. So thank you for tuning in to this week's Trader Talk TV episode, and we'll see you next week.